What if I told you that the biggest rock bands in history didn't die because you stopped liking them, but because they were completely incompetent? You think a couple guys in flannel shirts from Seattle killed the hair metal industry? Well, folks, I'm here to tell you, you are wrong. These guys had millions of dollars, sold out stadiums, enough hairspray to burn a hole in the ozone layer, and they threw it all away because of egos, bad timing, and a cartoon nerd named Stewart. Here's how the glam rock gods choked on their own spandex. So you know that song, The Final Countdown? Of course you do. It's a song they play at every single hockey game and magic show in the world. Da-da-da-da! The synth riff is basically the national anthem of the 80s, and the band that wrote it is the Swedish group called Europe. If you know anything about the Swedes, you know that they know how to write a hook. And in 1986, Europe is on top of the world. They're making millions of dollars. They're playing arenas. They're living the dream. But here's the thing. Not everybody in the band is happy about this, specifically the guitarist, a guy named John Norum. But John considers himself a serious musician. He likes heavy blues rock, he likes the real stuff, and suddenly he's in a band that is famous for a keyboard riff that sounds like a toy space laser, and he hates it. Doesn't just dislike it, absolutely freaking hates it. And to make matters worse, the band is on this massive world tour. And because it is the 80s and everything is about image, the management wants everything to look perfect. So they start making the band do these TV appearances where they don't even play their instruments. They just stand there and pretend to play while the track runs in the background. And for John, this is the final straw. He looks at the other guys in the band, looks at the screaming fans, and decides that the Final Countdown is too commercial. He says it's garbage. So right in the middle of their biggest tour, the moment where they're making the most money they will ever make, John Norum quits. Just like that. He packs his guitar, walks away because he cannot handle the cheese factor. So the band replaces him and they keep going. And they make a lot of money for a few years. But then the 90s happen. And if you know anything about music history, you know that 1991 is the year that everything changes. This new thing called grunge comes out. Bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden show up. And suddenly, looking like a poodle and wearing makeup is just not cool anymore. But Europe, they don't get the memo. They go in the studio and they record a new album called Prisoners in Paradise. And this is a polished, expensive, big-budget rock album. They think it's going to be another massive hit. They think the party is going to last forever. But it doesn't. The album comes out in 1991 and it hits a brick wall. The media doesn't care. The radio stations don't care. In the US, the album doesn't even chart. This is the band that just had multi-platinum hits, and now they can't even get on the board. Sales are terrible. Tour venues get smaller. They're trying to sell this polished, happy product to a world that suddenly wants to be depressed and wear dirty clothes. And the guys in the band feel this pressure. They feel that they're disconnected from reality. They're trying to be rock stars in a world that hates rock star. So it all ends on New Year's Eve, 1991. They're in Japan for a show at the Tokyo Dome. And they call the show Final Countdown 91. And they probably think that this is a clever name for a concert, but it turns out to be a prophecy. They play the show, the year turns to 1992, and that is it. The band breaks up. The countdown hit zero, and there was nothing left. They went from the biggest synth riff on the planet to unemployed in Tokyo in just a few years. So then you have this band called Dokken. And if you like 80s metal, then you know Dokken. They're huge. They have the hits, they have the look. Hell, George was even rocking the Kaja Gugu hairstyle back in the day. But the problem with Dokken is that the two most important guys in the band hate each other's guts. On one side, you got the singer, Don Dokken. On the other side, you have the guitarist, George Lynch. And we're not talking about just a little creative tension. These guys are at war all the time. Cannot even stand being in the same room. So around the late 80s, things are getting bad. Don's dealing with some serious anxiety issues. He's popping Valium, drinking alcohol just to get through the day. And in his head, all of this is George Lynch's fault. He blames George for the stress. Blames George for the mess that the band is in. And George isn't exactly helping. He thinks Don is an egomaniac who wants to control everything. So they finish a tour and the tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Don calls a meeting. He gets the management, gets the record execs from Elektra Records, and he gets the band together. And he drops the hammer. He looks at them and says, I can't continue to play with Lynch. It is over. So now this is where the story gets messy because nobody agrees on what actually happened next. According to George Lynch, Don had a plan. George says that Don walked into that meeting and basically told the rest of the band, I am going to take this band name, I'm going to take the deal, and I'm going to run with it. You guys are going to get left in the dust, and if you're lucky, maybe I will hire you as employees. So imagine that. You're in a band with a guy and he tells you that you're fired, but if you're good, he might let you work for him, some kind of hourly or salary basis. So the band splits, it's ugly, and Don thinks he's got the upper hand. After all, his last name is Dokken. The band is called Dokken, so it seems pretty obvious that he gets to keep the name. So he goes out and he tries to form a new version of the band, finds new musicians, gets ready to record, thinks he's going to be a superstar on his own. But the other guys, George Lynch and the bass player and the drummer, they are not having it. They get a lawyer, and then they sue Don. They go to court. Now, you would think that a guy named Don Dokken would be allowed to use the name Dokken. But as we know, if something doesn't make sense, then law has to be involved. The justice system is a weird place. The judge looks at the contract, looks at the arguments, and the judge rules in favor of the other guys. Tells Don Dokken that you cannot use your last name, Dokken. So it's pretty insane. He's banned from using his own name for 5 years. He has to go out, try to have a career, but he can't tell anybody who he is. He might have been wild to just go ahead and change his last name to Johnson. And he later admitted that this ruling really hurt him, obviously. The band is dead, the momentum is gone. They missed their window to be megastars because they're too busy suing each other. And years later, they try to reunite. They think maybe time heals all wounds, but it does not. They get back together, and almost immediately the fighting starts again. At one point, they're trying to work things out, and George Lynch just punches Don in the face. Straight up punches him. Don says, "That's it. I've got my stuff, and I'm going home." And that is why they never became Van Halen. They're too damn busy punching each other. So now let's talk about Ratt. And yes, that is Ratt with 2 T's because 1 T is just not cool enough. So in the mid-'80s, Ratt is massive. They put out an album, Out of the Cellar. It sells millions. They got that song, Round and Round. It's on the radio every 5 minutes. They're the kings of the Sunset Strip in LA. They got the girls, the cars, and of course the drugs, especially the drugs. But pretty quickly things start to go sideways. They go in the studio to record their next albums and the vibes are bad. The guitarist Robin Crosby is developing a serious heroin addiction. The band is fighting. The music is starting to suffer. And by the time the 90s roll around, Ratt's popularity is starting to tank. Sales are dropping. Venues are half empty. And usually when you ask a hair metal guy why his band failed in the 90s, he will say one word, grunge. They all blame Nirvana. They all blame the flannel shirts. But Stephen Pearcy, Ratt's singer, has a different theory. And he's probably right. Stephen says that grunge didn't kill Ratt. He says that Ratt killed Ratt. Or rather, the music industry killed Ratt by cloning them. Because after Ratt got famous, every record label in LA wanted their own Ratt. I mean, you, the viewer, you tell me in the comments, wouldn't you want your own Ratt? So they went out and they signed every single band that looked like them. And suddenly, you didn't just have 5 hair metal bands, you had 500. Stephen calls them mini Motleys and mini Ratts. And says the market was totally flooded with cookie cutter bands. It was saturation. You turn on MTV and it's just an endless parade of guys with teased hair, makeup on, spandex, lace, doing the exact same high kicks and playing the exact same guitar solos, and it got boring. Stephen said when everybody is making the same music, using the same producers and the same video directors, you're going to have a problem. And so the fans got sick of it. It wasn't that they suddenly loved grunge, it was that they're vomiting from consuming too much sweet glam rock, too much candy. They needed a vegetable, and they certainly got a lot of them, eventually. And inside the band, it was a mess. Robin Crosby's addiction was out of control. He could barely play. The band was a disaster zone. Stephen Pearcy looks around at this sinking ship, and in 1992 decides he's had enough, so he quits the band. And this is a huge blow. You can't really have Ratt without the guy who sings like a pirate with a sinus infection. That is the sound. So Stephen leaves, Robin Crosby spirals further downward. The band tries to keep going, but nobody cares. They release albums that nobody buys. They blame the industry, but really they were just one product on a shelf with 1,000 other identical products by that time. They became generic. And nothing kills a rock star faster than being boring. So then you have Slaughter. And Slaughter is a band that basically showed up to the party right as the cops were arriving to shut it down. Slaughter forms in the late 80s. And they're one of the last big glam metal bands to get signed. And for a minute, it looks like they're going to make it. We came up from the ashes of Vinnie Vincent's group. Actually, it was even possibly going to be a band formed around Vinnie Vincent, but then Vinnie Vincent got fired from his own band. Hostile takeover. But they released their first album and it does great. And then in April of 92, they released their second album called The Wildlife. Now, April of 92 is a very bad time to release a hair metal album. And yes, this one did get wiped out by grunge. Never mind, it had been out for 6 months. The entire world had decided that they just cannot stand Hairspray, and all of a sudden now they love depression. But amazingly, Slaughter's album actually does okay even through all of this. Goes to number 8 on the charts. Goes gold. Seems like maybe, just maybe, they can survive this grunge apocalypse. But they can't. Because while the album sells some copies, it doesn't have any hit songs. There's no top 40 hits. So the radio won't play them. MTV, meanwhile, is now busy playing Pearl Jam and Nirvana. So the culture has shifted. Slaughter is standing on the wrong side of the line. And then the universe decides to just completely destroy them. First, in 1993, their guitarist Tim Kelly gets arrested. And it's not for something cool like throwing a TV out of a hotel window. It's for drug trafficking charges. That is serious legal trouble. And then the bassist, Dana Strum, is riding his motorcycle, gets into a bad accident, injures his playing hand, so now he can't play bass, so the band is paralyzed. They can't tour, they can't record, they're stuck. They spend months trying to recover. They finally get ready to record a third album. They delay it until February of 94. They film a music video, and they're ready to try and come back. But then the record label, Chrysalis Records, gets bought out by a bigger company, EMI Records, and when big companies merge, they look at the roster and they cut the dead weight. They took a look at Slaughter, a hair metal band in 94 with legal problems and injury problems, and they said, out of here. So they get dropped. Now they have no label, no support, no momentum. But still, they try to pivot. In 97, they release an album called Revolution to try to change their sound. They try a little more of that psychedelic vibe, a little more real. Nobody buys it, nobody cares. Fails to make any impact at all. And then comes the final tragedy. In 98, Tim Kelly, the guitarist, is driving in the Arizona desert, gets into a car accident, and is killed. And just like that, the band is effectively over as a creative force. Mark Slaughter, the vocalist, gets bitter about it. He insists that grunge didn't kill the music. He says it was the people in the business that killed the music. He's convinced it was a conspiracy of executives. But the reality is, they showed up late. They got hit with bad luck, and then they got hit by a truck, and it was over before it really began. And finally, we have the saddest story of them all, the story of Winger. The Winger was a very successful band. They had hits like 17, which aged beautifully. Sarcasm alert. Kip Winger, the lead singer, was considered to be a heartthrob. He was on the cover of magazines. Chicks loved him. He was a serious musician, too. He had studied classical music. He did the ballet. He took his job very seriously. But none of that mattered because of a cartoon on MTV called Beavis and Butthead. If you didn't watch MTV in the 90s, you have to understand something. Beavis and Butthead was the most important show on television because it dictated what was cool and what sucked. If Beavis and Butthead said something was cool, then it was cool. Yeah, cool. And if they said it sucked, it was dead. That sucks. So in the show, Beavis wears a Metallica shirt. Butthead wears an AC/DC shirt. Well, their shirts change around a bit, but that's the general idea. These are the cool bands. But there's a third character, a neighbor kid named Stuart Stevenson. And Stuart is a wimp. He's a nerd. He's geeky. He has no friends. He tries too hard and really likes to drink milk. And the creator of the show, Mike Judge, decided that Stuart needed to wear a band t-shirt as well. And he wanted a band that represented the opposite of cool. He wanted a band that represented everything wussy. So what does he do? Well, he draws Stuart wearing a Winger t-shirt. And right there, just like that, this was a nuclear bomb for the band's career. Every week, millions of kids watched this show and saw the Biggest Loser on TV wearing a Winger logo. It became a subconscious association. If you liked Winger, you were Stuart. You were a wuss. And the show was ruthless. They made fun of Winger's videos. They called them wusses constantly. You don't want to be a wuss, do you? And Kip Winger said later that this was devastating. Said it was the one thing that he couldn't laugh off. He had Metallica throwing darts at a poster of his face and Nothing Else Matters, Lars. And he said even that wasn't as bad as the Stuart t-shirt. He became the punching bag for the entire industry. And the crazy part is, it was totally random. Mike Judge said later that they tried a few different names on the shirt. It could have been Poison, could have been Nelson, but the Winger logo just looked the funniest on the drawing. Can you imagine? Basically taken down by your own logo. And it stuck. So Kip Winger's career was destroyed by Doodle. He became a joke. The grunge wave came in and washed away the rest of the glam scene, but Winger didn't just fade away, they were laughed out of the room. And what's more devastating about the whole thing was that Winger is an extraordinarily talented band. And to a lot of fans, out of any of them, Winger was actually the one that probably had the biggest chance of withstanding all of that and continuing to carry on. But it was the cartoon that took them down. In 2011, MTV decided to bring back Beavis and Butthead for new episodes, and they contacted Kip Winger. They asked for his permission to use the logo on the shirt again, and Kip found this ironic. He said, "They didn't ask my permission the first time," which was somewhat of an admission of guilt, really. But this time, he said yes. He figured he might as well at least get paid for being the butt of the joke. So now when you see Stewart being a nerd, Kip Winger actually gets a check. It's not exactly the rock star dream he had in mind, but hey, money is money. And that, my friends, is how the era ended. Not with a bang, but with a snicker. Smack that like button. Smack the subscribe button. Join the family. Oh, and hype it too. To my subscribers, you rock. To my patrons, you freaking rock. And thank you all so much for watching.